Chen, I don't know if you're near a CNN monitor, but let's play that tape one more time. This is a very telling piece of videotape, and I'm hopeful that we can run this through the telestrator D in the control room. Phil Chen, can you see the video where you are? Can you see CNN?
Unfortunately not. We're in the bus going back to
here's what we're seeing that is a very significant and what you should look at. Multiple trails, multiple indication of multiple targets there as the space shuttle streaked over Dallas, Texas. I think that once it doesn't take a lot of elaboration to tell you what multiple trails and multiple targets would indicate. Phil, anything to add on that?
Just that there's no doubt that we've had a bad day. You just can't lose communications with the shuttle. As you said before, everything's like clockwork with landing. It should have come across, even if all communications were close to the shuttle, it should have come up on the radars, the ones that came over the Florida horizon.
All right, Phil, let's do this. If we could run through the scenarios here. That we got an indication. I don't know if you could hear Kyle Herring, but he was talking about some problems with the hydraulics that might have been indicated on some of the sensors there right before communication was lost. The shuttle's coming in without power. Auxiliary power units are actually controlling the power, generating power on them. Those auxiliary power units use a substance called hydrazine, among other things, to operate. What are the other areas that would be high on the list of things to look at as the shuttle is coming in?
Well, there's three auxiliary power units, as you said. They operated flawlessly on launch. They used one of them to check out the shuttle the day before for landing. They turned on all three during landing today. And those are used to operate the wings and elevons, basically the same as on an airplane, to help control the shuttle during landing. Obviously, if there was a major disaster on one of those, it would be a bad day. The shuttle is an electrically operated vehicle. It uses three fuel cells for power. It's not likely that all three could have failed, but that would certainly be a possibility.
All right.
There's no doubt something happened.
As we look at the very distinct and obvious signature of multiple targets, as is the term for NASA, meaning pieces, what are the scenarios that we'd be looking at?
I hate to say that, the only obvious thing I could think of is some kind of a major.
All right, we're losing Phil Chen, and hopefully we'll get his cell phone signal back. But what is important to note here is that as the shuttle comes in, it is really begins a process somewhere over the Indian Ocean of slowing down from a speed of 17,500 miles an hour all the way to the landing. The runway at the shuttle landing facility at the Kennedy Space Center. And as it comes in, it's a process of steep banks in a very nose-high attitude that shuttles endure in order to slow it down from its orbital speed, 17,500 miles an hour, ultimately to zero. Fair amount of stress put on a vehicle in the course of that, as you might suspect, as it goes through that tremendous braking procedure. Now, we're talking about something that is moving at a speed Mach 25 times the speed of sound, 6 or 7 times faster than a rifle bullet. And that particular structure endures a tremendous amount of stress. Let's get Kyle Herring back on the line. Kyle Herring is Public Affairs Officer for NASA in Houston. Kyle, what can you tell us?
Nothing new, Miles, that I can report to you at this point. Still maintaining the same posture that we were in just moments ago. So there's really nothing new at this point that I can pass on to you.
All right. Give us a sense, Kyle, with your familiarity of this, as a shuttle comes in for re-entry, the sorts of stresses. As we look at this tape one more time from our affiliate WFAA, streaking across Dallas, you see what looks like a streaking comet, a meteor. And then all of a sudden, right at that point, I don't know if you saw it, right as it hit went behind that pole, multiple targets there, multiple streaks. Give us a sense of the kind of stress it would be enduring at that point, Kyle, going about 14,000 miles an hour or so.
Well, just based on my experience with a shuttle reentry, you're usually somewhere around 250, 300,000 feet in altitude at that point. So you're back in the Earth's atmosphere. That reentry into the atmosphere really occurs about 400,000 feet, and that's typically out over the Pacific Ocean. Then the shuttle, basically, it's high-speed reentry. At that point, you're probably going somewhere around 6 times, 7 times the speed of sound, maybe. And there's a series of high-speed bank turns that are made by the computers to slow the vehicle down.
All right.
Basically put the underside of the orbiter into the direction of travel to slow it down.
Kyle, watch this tape with me. WFAA gave this to us. And look, right at that point, significant difference right there. Don't you agree?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's definitely something that occurred that we obviously at this point don't know what that is.
Yeah.
That caused this.
And then we're talking about stuff that we have here exclusively as we watch this. Very distinct. And do you recall seeing the which is bailout? What would be a scenario if something was going wrong at this point? What are the options for the crew for getting out if they need to?
Well, I'm afraid, Miles, that there is not really an option at this altitude. The bailout procedures that are in place for a shuttle, either during after a engine problem on launch or on reentry, are bailout procedures that would take place or be in effect below about 20 to 30,000 feet or so. So much lower than what you're seeing here.
And you're saying we're talking 200,000 feet at least there, about 6 times the speed of sound. But what we're also talking about here, Kyle, when you look at all the forces and stresses on a space shuttle from launch all the way to landing, you know, we talk about max Q on liftoff, when the maximum dynamic pressure on the shuttle. When does it encounter the most stress? Launch, landing? Is this the period right here that we're seeing this tape?
Well, launch is probably among the most stressful during that max Q period, because that's when there's the most aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. In that altitude range on the way uphill, typically there's not a max Q, if you will, on the way down. There are stresses on the order of about maybe 2 Gs or so when you're making the big wide sweeping turn approaching the runway. But at this point, there aren't any stresses in terms of G-forces that you're really feeling, because you're still pretty high up in the upper reaches of the atmosphere. So it's not very thick, if you will, at that altitude.
All right, we should tell you, Kyle, that while you were talking, we're receiving some calls from viewers. Palestine, Texas is the date line. We're about 100 miles south of Dallas, I'm told, and there are reports there of a loud impact. Let's leave that at that for just a moment. Kyle, if you could stand by. Phil Chen, just could you describe, you're right there at the shuttle landing facility, describe the scene for me, please? I guess we've lost Phil Chen. I should point out the crew. The commander, Rick Husband, the pilot, Willie McCool, Mission Specialist 1, David Brown, Mission Specialist 2, Kalpana Chawla, Michael Anderson, Mission Specialist 3, Laurel B. Clark, Mission Specialist 4, and the payload specialist, the first Israeli ever to fly in space on this 16-day mission, Ilan Ramon, at the tail end of what was a relatively flawless mission, scientific mission, 16 days in orbit. What we're seeing here is very ominous indeed. These are pictures which tell the story. That is clearly the shuttle breaking up as it passes south of Texas, Dallas, Texas, near Palestine, as it was coming in. Communication was lost about 15 minutes prior to its anticipated landing at the Kennedy Space Center at 9:16 a.m. Eastern local time. Kyle Herring, search and rescue forces in motion yet? Can you confirm that? We've lost Kyle Herring. We can only presume that those same calls that we are getting here are being received with the authorities. And we're joined by a veteran space shuttle astronaut, a man who spent several months on the space station Mir, a man who has experience before and after the Challenger disaster with NASA and the shuttle. Norm Thagard, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Miles. Good to talk with you.
Norm, can you see these pictures? Are you watching CNN?
Well, I could bring it up, but I'm in fact, upstairs where I don't have a TV. If we get a break, I can go to the TV.
Well, Norm, as you well know, because you were with me that night, it's practically a carbon copy of the picture we saw from the South Pacific when the Space Shuttle Mir came down. Multiple targets, multiple trails behind those targets. Where does that leave the experts now, the engineers? What do they do?
It almost certainly, I would think, Miles, means that the shuttle broke up. It is an electronically controlled vehicle, and if it, for some reason, loses control at those speeds, it's going to be a bad situation.
Let's back up and talk about what could cause a space shuttle to break up at this juncture in its flight. We've been talking a little bit about how it's hydraulically controlled. We know what hydraulics are, obviously, but the shuttle doesn't have any operative engines as it comes in, so they fire up what are called auxiliary power units run on hydrazine, which power those hydraulics, and those are kind of well, those machines are something you have to really be careful about, right, Norm?
They run at very high speeds, I think something like 80,000 RPM, and it is possible for, I guess, one to fly apart. However, there are 3 of them, and you can certainly operate with the loss of one. And some of the rockets are used right down to almost the last, just as the shuttle starts to go subsonic. So some of the steering rockets or attitude rockets continue to fire even down close to ground.
Okay, so those steering rockets, how much would they be? They would be used at this juncture then? We're talking about the rockets that are typically used on orbit to maneuver the shuttle. They would be used in the higher altitudes where there's less air passing over the aerodynamic surfaces of the shuttle, correct?
That's correct, and as the shuttle gets lower and lower, I think various of those rockets start to be deselected, and then finally, before the shuttle or right around the time it goes subsonic, none of the rockets are being used anymore.
I see. Let's go through what they call in NASA and what they will undoubtedly begin even as we speak, as they preserve their data, that rather ominous statement coming out of Mission Control, which you will recall, of course, from the Challenger days, the fault tree, where they try to figure out what are they going to be looking at, try to help us prioritize how they would try to sift through this, what's happened here.
I would assume that they all had data up until some moment, and
shuttle. Flight controllers here are securing all information and notes and data pertinent to the scheduled descent and landing of the shuttle today.
What's his name again?
As part of contingency procedures. Search and rescue teams in the Dallas-Fort Worth area have been alerted.
We are listening to James Hartsfield, Public Affairs Officer for NASA in Houston, and if you're just joining us...
Any debris that is located in the north central Texas vicinity that may be related to the Space Shuttle contingency should be reported to local law enforcement authorities and should be avoided as it may be hazardous due to toxic substances that are used as propellants for the Space Shuttle.
James Hartsfield in Houston, offering up a word of warning to those who might encounter debris from the Space Shuttle Columbia. And if you are just joining us, the picture you are seeing right now tells the story. 100 miles south of Dallas, Texas, at an altitude of 200,000 feet, the Space Shuttle Columbia, on its 28th mission, broke up in flight 6 times the speed of sound. Take a look at the crew just briefly, if you could. There's the commander, Rick Husband, Kaplana Chawla, pilot Willie McCool, Michael Anderson, Ilan Ramon of Israel, Laurel Clark, and finally David Brown. 7 crew members on board the Space Shuttle Columbia. Let's go to a witness from Palestine, Texas. Bob Moulter, what did you hear? What did you see?
Well, approximately 8:09 this morning, the entire house started to shake. And living in close proximity to a railroad track, we thought and with chemicals traveling, I thought might have been an explosion. So I walked outside and immediately saw this spiral, long spiral in the air, and it was headed in a southeast direction from where we're at. And the rumbling continued. It was very intense for approximately 2 minutes, and then just stopped. And about that point, the trail disappeared down towards the sunrise.
Bob Moulter, I'm sorry, I've got a lot of things going on here, but you didn't see, you just heard things. Is that accurate to say?
No, we saw the spirals in the sky.
Spirals, okay.
There were spirals like a high-flying jet, except it wasn't in a straight line.
Right. And did you see multiple targets, if you will, pieces?
Yes, it was like a wide band that was moving, and I would say that, and of course it was difficult by looking up, but I would say within the spiral it was a wide wave as it was moving. It was not in a straight line.
Right. Now, did you have any sense of what was happening at that point?
None whatsoever.
Yeah.
In fact, I called my wife at work and asked her, did you hear and feel that? And she said, yes. I said, did you see it in the sky? She said, no. And she said, turn on the TV. So I turned on the local station. There was nothing there. Mm-hmm. So I immediately switched over to CNN. And within 1 minute, of course, you came up with the breaking news. And I realized what it was.
Now, what exactly did you hear, Mr. Moulter?
It would be a sound that would be very similar to a tornado, if you've ever experienced that. It's a very loud, intense roar, and it stays at a certain pitch. There was no variance in it whatsoever. And as I say, it was very loud, and it diminished as the trail continued further southeast. But it was loud enough, and it was low enough, because as I say, this trail was extremely wide, that it shook the building completely, the house. And I would say that it shook the house for a good minute.
And how close do you think it landed to where you are?
It's difficult for me to say. As I say, it was headed southeast towards the horizon, and then I lost it into the sun.
Yeah. All right, Bob Moulter, thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. Norm Thagard back with us, veteran shuttle astronaut, veteran of a long stay aboard the space station Mir. Norm, when last we spoke and we lost you, we were talking about using, Challenger as a template here as to what happens in the immediate aftermath of something like this. What's going on right now?
I'm sure there's some disbelief, but the pictures and all the circumstances tell you that you know what happened. And so everyone now is being professional at NASA. They'll be looking at their systems, all of the flight controllers, and they'll try and come up with the cause and go from there.
I imagine professionalism is put to the test in so many ways in a juncture like this.
Yeah, well, I think all the folks at NASA are professional no matter what, but you feel numb. I know I did, and I know I do now.
Yeah. It's easy to, for the layperson, to think about space shuttle missions as being routine. But anybody who knows a little something about this would tell you just the opposite, wouldn't they?
They would tell you that because rockets are rockets. Anybody that sits on top of a rocket knows there's a risk involved. And even on entry, although we don't think of that as being nearly as dangerous as ascent, it still has to go perfectly because you start out at 17,500 miles an hour and you pick up a little speed until you start slowing down in the atmosphere. So it has to work well.
Well, you mentioned that point because we've had conversations before where you've told me really the only part of the mission you sweat is the first 8.5 minutes, the rise to orbit. And after that, things, relatively speaking, are and given where you are relatively safe. The prospect of something happening on descent, on re-entry, how much did that weigh on your mind when you flew?
Not very much. Certainly you are mindful that the shuttle's got to be in the right attitude and the systems have to be working, but there's so much redundancy, and since you are not in a situation where you have very powerful rockets that can malfunction in a second and kill you, that's not the situation with entry.
Yeah. Norm, stay on the line, please, if you will. And by the way, are you near CNN? Are you seeing these pictures yet? Norm, are you still there?
I'm here, Miles. I'm watching it on TV.
Okay. What does that tell you when you see that?
Well, it's breaking up.
Okay. Let's go to Jerry Lininger on the line. Jerry, I don't know if you're home in northern Michigan, but that's where Jerry's home is. Jerry is a shuttle veteran, also a Mir veteran, retired astronaut as well. Jerry, what are your thoughts as you look at this scene and what might be going on right now for NASA, for the professionals, for search and rescue?
Well, it's a horrible thing, and I'm sure they're just trying to put the parts together and try to reconstruct things so it never happens again. You got to get to the root of what happened there.
Yeah. We were just talking to Norm about this concept that the most dangerous period of time is the first 8.5 minutes of the mission. the point where the rockets are firing and all the things are exploding behind you. How many scenarios do the crews in their simulations run through on reentry?
Yeah, just, I don't want to say infinite, but I mean you train and you train and you train. But I can tell you reentry, the normal reentry kind of sounds like a locomotive train coming up behind you. Very dynamic. You're inside a fireball. Plasma collapsing around you. It's like the worst turbulence you've ever been on in an airplane. So it is very dynamic, and if you lose your orientation in space and the tiles aren't pointing in the right direction, you get what you're seeing here today.
Mm-hmm. Jerry, let's listen to James Hartsfield for a minute out of Mission Control.
Pertinent to the descent of the Space Shuttle Columbia this morning from orbit. The last communications were received from the Space Shuttle Columbia at approximately 8 a.m. Central Time, as it was an altitude of about 200,000 feet above north central Texas, en route to a planned landing at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida at 8:16 a.m. Central Time. Search and rescue teams in the Dallas-Fort Worth area have been alerted to the Space Shuttle contingency. Any debris that may be located in the Dallas-Fort Worth vicinity should be avoided and may be hazardous due to the toxic nature of propellants used on board the shuttle, and should be reported to local law enforcement authorities. To repeat, any debris that is located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area should be avoided, as it may be hazardous due to toxic substances used as propellant on board the space shuttle, and should be reported to local law enforcement authorities.
All right, with that...
This is Mission Control, Houston.
With that word of caveat from James Hartsfield, Mission Control, Houston. Jerry Lininger, what goes through... on the one hand, you're a technical person, you're an engineer, and I know that, you're a medical doctor as well, but you go through sort of the technicalities of this, but the other side of you is sort of, it takes your breath away, doesn't it? Jerry, you there?
Yes, I'm with you.
What are your thoughts?
Well, it's just a horrible thing. Nothing worse.
Yeah. I'm going to leave it at that for just a moment. Stay with us if you can. Ricky Lufkin is on the line with us. He's from about 100 miles south of Dallas, where we believe the debris of the Space Shuttle Columbia, oldest orbiter in NASA's fleet, the one that flew first in April of 1981 and flew its last mission, this time the 28th mission, clearly from this videotape from WFAA, breaking up into several pieces over southern Texas. Do we have Mr. Lufkin? I'm sorry, Ricky Calbert. Ricky Calbert, are you there?
Yes.
What did you see? What did you hear, sir?
Well, it was about 10 till 8 this morning, Central Time, our time, and my wife and I heard a rumble kind of building, and it eventually got to where our house was shaking. I got up and went to our back door to see if I could see anything. I didn't see anything. It lasted for maybe a minute and a half, and it slowly tapered off. So that's when I went into the living room and turned the TV on to see if I could find anything, to see if maybe they were reporting anything on the local news.
How'd you describe what you saw then?
No, I didn't.
Just all what you heard then?
Yeah, just what I heard.
Okay, and it was very distinct kind of rumble to it?
Oh yeah. If you live, it's just like somebody else was saying. I don't know if they were talking about the way this sounded or not, but if you live close to a railroad track, extremely close, like your back door, that's what it sounded like, and that's what it felt like. My entire house was shaking, and it's not a small house.
Wow. Okay.
So,
all right.
I tried to call in as soon as I could. It took about an hour for me to find a number, but...
All right. Well, we appreciate your call and your insights for us. Let's get CNN's Gene Meserve with us. She covers Homeland Security for us. The sad truth is that in this day and age, and particularly with an Israeli on board, one of the things that is considered is the possibility of terrorism. Gene, that seems remote right now, but what exactly are your sources telling you?
Well, I've had a conversation with an administration official who says based on the information we have right now, it is, quote, highly unlikely that this was related to terrorism. This administration official noting, amongst other things, that the shuttle was, at the time of this apparent breakup, at a very, very high altitude. Mentioned perhaps because there have been various things written and said about the possible vulnerability of aircraft to weaponry like shoulder-fired missiles, which might be in the hands of terrorists. The multi-agency investigation, of course, will be conducted, and its findings will be pored over by officials involved in homeland security and terrorism. But reiterating once again, this official saying it is premature for anyone to jump to any sort of conclusion that this might have been a terrorist event. Miles?
Gene Meserve, thank you very much. And we should point out, and Gene, you can amplify on this if you want. I mean, for example, if you're running through these scenarios, and as long as we're in this area, let's run through them. A surface-to-air missile, Stinger type thing, would have a maximum range of maybe 10 or 15,000 feet. The space shuttle is traveling extremely fast, 6 times the speed of sound, at about 200,000 feet. And it's hard to imagine anything that would be of a terrorist nature that could be involved, correct?
Exactly the point, that this spacecraft was just at too high an altitude for anything of that sort apparently to have been a factor in what's happened here.
All right. Gene Meserve, thank you very much. Norm Thagard, are you still with us? All right, we're going to cue him up, and just want to recap for those of you who might just now be tuning in. You are looking at what is the final moments of the Space Shuttle Columbia on its 28th flight. First flew April of 1981. There you saw a very specific moment there where some added smoke came out of the trail there, that single trail. And then subsequent to that, as you look in here, you'll see it develops into multiple, let me try to clear that out for a second. It develops into multiple streams, multiple trails, like a series of comets. You see them breaking up there? You see those points there. Clearly there was something that happened. It was almost like a puff of smoke that I saw. If we could we roll that back one more time, and I'll try to identify that point for you where we saw kind of a burst of smoke which was left behind as prior to that. And I think it was probably, well, you can see here quite clearly there's some pieces there. I think this might be after, oh, there it is, right there. See that smoke? See that there was a flash and then a puff of smoke. That was clearly some kind of explosion. Probably a secondary explosion, because what you saw first were those initial pieces that came off for a brief period of time, maybe 2-3 seconds, then a burst, then the smoke that went behind it, and then shortly thereafter, as you see, multiple pieces being tracked there very clearly in this shot. And as I say, it reminds me so much of seeing the Space Shuttle Mir as it came down to Earth, coming down in multiple pieces, streaking down that way. Very, even to a layperson, this is quite clearly a breakup of the vehicle. Norm Thagard, your thoughts? Is Norm there? Okay. Who do we have?
Jerry's here.
I'm sorry?
Jerry Linenger.
Jerry. Are you able to see CNN yet?
Yes, I am. Yeah. I've been watching.
All right.
I think you're exactly right in what you're analyzing. I would say it's mostly secondary things, the puff of smoke and that. You've got a lot of materials. Mm-hmm. You're coming through a lot of friction, a lot of heat, and if things are not protected by the tiles, they're going to heat up, and any chemicals on board or leftover rocket fuel, anything of that nature is going to ignite.
Okay, I wasn't able to hear a lot of what you said there. They were talking to me, Jerry. I hope you understand. But
no problem.
There's that flash. You want to offer any sort of supposition there?
Yeah, I would say just what you said. It's very dynamic, and when you're coming in, you're heating everything up thousands of degrees. And so I think those are secondary explosions. Obviously, the primary event already took place. That's just debris coming in, and it's going to burn up, and that's what you're seeing there.
All right, there's that shot, that unmistakable shot that we're telling you about here. We've gotten some still pictures in. We're going to try to get those on the air to you. One of our viewers sent them to us. But let's recap once again, if we could. The Space Shuttle Columbia was supposed to land at the Kennedy Space Center 9:16 a.m. Eastern Time, 45 minutes ago. That has not happened. What has happened is what you see here. Right around the 9 o'clock Eastern hour, as it was streaking across southern Texas, well, not southern Texas, central Texas, 100 miles south of Dallas. It broke up at a speed of about 6 times the speed of sound, at an altitude of about 200,000 feet, broke up into numerous pieces. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 significant streaks there. As you look down there, you can see those streaks. It's quite obvious what we're talking about there. And I don't want to spend too much time going down what is an area of speculation at any case at this point anyway, but I wanted to point that out to our viewers to give you some context to the kinds of things that will be discussed as this investigation begins. Jerry, I hope you're still watching CNN. I'm going to show you some still photos that one of our viewers sent us. Take a look at this first shot. This comes from Adam. I don't have Adam's last name, but Adam, I thank you for it. If we can put the SP-103 on the air, please, and I'll show you what comes from Texas. And if you look, can we put that through the telestrator as well, so I can point out where things are? I'm trying to get that worked out as soon as we get that. But is what you can see, if you can see my pointer there, okay, right here in the upper center of your screen, that is the shuttle, Columbia, streaking across the sky. I've been exhorting viewers all morning to go out and take a peek. You'll notice one tail, okay? Now, this is clearly in the order of them taking. This is very distinct. And this, I am presuming, is the next photo. And what you see very, very clearly here is piece number 1, piece number 2. All right, that's picture number 2. Now, as we continue on, you see it's harder to make this out, but what we're seeing here is it looks like multiple pieces. This could be out of order. That might have occurred before the previous one, but you'll see what amount to a bunch of little dots there. Those are significant pieces that we're seeing that are superheated. Let's listen to James Hartsfield in Houston for a minute, shall we?
No communications or tracking data was received from Columbia since that time. Search and rescue forces have been alerted in the north central Texas vicinity and eastern Texas. Any persons in those areas reporting debris should avoid any debris that may be associated with the space shuttle's contingency, as it may be hazardous and toxic due to the toxic nature of propellants that are used on board the shuttle. Any such debris that is located should also be reported as quickly as possible to local law enforcement agencies. Again, a space shuttle contingency has been declared in mission control. Flight controllers here are securing all information and data pertinent to today's descent by the Space Shuttle Columbia.
James Hartsfield.
The last communications from which were received at approximately 8 a.m. Central Time.
James
This is
Hartsfield,
Mission Control, Houston.
who is sitting in one of those consoles there in Mission Control. You can't see him right now, but what you're seeing is a group of people who are got to be a fair amount of shock, astonishment, and deep sadness in that room right now. But as is their job, they must now continue the process and begin what is the early stages of an investigation into what went wrong. Let's look one more time. I wanted to show you that last picture we received from our viewer, just to give you a sense. I've been showing you progression shots. If we go back to SP-103, please. I can show you, and it's zoomed in, and you can see down here. Let's give you a sense of there's a spot there, spot there, spot there. 3, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 distinct targets there, if you will. That's a bit of a euphemism. In any case, that is the final remnants of the Space Shuttle Columbia. Let's remind you of the crew and tell you who was there. The commander, Rick Husband. He was flying his second shuttle mission, his first as a commander, colonel in the United States Air Force. This is the stuff of boyhood dreams. Rick Husband always wanted to do what he was doing at that moment we just told you about. Born in July of 1957. Willie McCool, shuttle pilot, selected by NASA in 1996, gone through the training, and this was his first mission, commander in the United States Navy. Kaplana Chawla, this was her second mission. STS-87 was her first back in 1997. She was born in India and is a U.S. citizen. Like to do aerobatics and tailwheel airplanes, among other things. PhD. David Brown, up next. David Brown, born in 1956 in April. Also his first flight, a captain in the United States Navy. He was a mission specialist, which means he wasn't in the front two seats flying, but has, to his credit, 2,700 flight hours, 1,700 in high-performance military aircraft, and his parents reside in Virginia. Michael Anderson, on his second flight, STS-89 was his first back in January of '98. He visited the Mir space station at that time, and he selected by NASA in 1994, mission specialist, born December of '59, a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force. Laura Clark, also a mission specialist. This was a busy scientific mission. They used a thing called the double space hab module, a couple of school bus size, about the size of a school bus scientific lab. She was very involved in this as a medical doctor and a commander in the United States Navy, hailed from Iowa, was flying her first flight. A fair amount of rookies on this particular one. And then the one that captured a lot of our attention on liftoff in particular, especially because of the concerns for security, Ilan Ramon, a colonel in the Israeli Air Force, who had a very, very decorated career as an F-16 fighter, including a raid in the mid-'80s on an Iraqi nuclear reactor, which was taken out by the Israeli Air Force. That was never publicly, officially confirmed, but we got that from sources that he was one of the people who took out that nuclear facility in Iraq. He became the first Israeli to fly in space, 3,000 hours of flight time in A-4s and F-16s and the like. There you see the full crew in their suits, and I'll just point out something about these suits. They're called launch and reentry suits, pumpkin suits they call them. I guess it's obvious why they call them that. They are full pressure suits. They put those helmets on when they come in, and those pressure suits are designed to allow them to withstand a sudden decompression, loss of oxygen or pressure inside the crew module, which is kind of almost a self-contained module inside the space shuttle. All right. We have another witness. I'm just going to finish my thought here. It is perhaps not widely known that there's no way for the crew to eject from a space shuttle. First couple of missions, there were ejection seats for the pilot and co-pilot. They could have punched out, literally exploding right through the kind of the roof, if need be. But it was not practical to come up with an ejection system that worked for 7 people. And thus, a lot of it had to do with weight and money, quite frankly. There was never an ejection system that was designed or built into the space shuttle. Crew trained for some evacuation bailout procedures, but as we heard from Kyle Herring of NASA just a little while ago, 200,000 feet, Mach 6, there was nothing any crew member could do in that situation in order to get away from the vehicle. Now, we have a witness from near Susie Vagu, is that correct? Vagu? Susie is on the line. She saw and heard something. She's joining us from Central Texas. Susie, go ahead.
Yes, hi. I'm in Huntington, Texas,
All right.
Angelina County.
All right. Tell me what you saw and what you heard.
Approximately 9 o'clock this morning, we heard a tremendous rumbling sound, and the dogs immediately. We have a horse ranch and raise horses, and the dogs went nuts. One of my guys was in the barn, and one of our horses literally jumped at him. We had a tremendous fog, and one of the guys that worked for me just came up to me and informed me that he feels that there's some rubber burning in our pasture, and he just went to go check. Listening to the scanner, we understand that all in Moffett and San Augustine County, Nacogdoches, and Angelina County, that there's debris. Also on the scanner, probably at about 9:15 right before CNN was announcing what in fact it was, The scanners were saying for the sheriff to go ahead and that it could have been the space shuttle. If you found anything, it was federal, to seal it off, not let anybody touch it, don't contaminate it, don't get near it.
Well, those are words to the wise, aren't they? What else have you heard on those scanners? Any sort of indications of people actually encountering debris?
Well, we're hearing that there's a whole bunch of debris in Moffat County, also in Jasper. We've heard. Actually, let me put the guy that works for me on the phone, and he just heard a whole bunch of stuff.
Hello?
Hello, Benjamin Laster. Go ahead. I believe we have another witness on the line. I'm sorry to the previous person. I wasn't able to hear the last part of that. Benjamin Laster, what did you see and hear?
Well, the barn and stuff, we was feeding the horses and stuff in the barn, and the barn started shaking all of a sudden and stuff like that, and I'm riding through the pasture, we're fixing to go back out there, and I smell some rubber, what smells like rubber burning, but I'm fixing to go find out and just see if there's anything laying around and stuff, because they're saying not touch nothing or stuff like that, so I don't know if I'm going to have anything or not. But here's my boss. You can talk to her.
Yeah, I'm sorry to do that. He was, up here and telling me all kinds of stuff. Hello?
Who did we just hear from, please?
Lynn, what's your last name? That's what I thought. Lynn Hearn.
Okay, I apologize. I was a little confused. I didn't know you handed the phone over. Somebody was yakking at me in my ear. I apologize for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so he smells burning rubber. He hasn't gone out to investigate just yet.
He's going out right now. I had him stand by in case he knew of something.
Yeah, okay. And now you're not a member of the authorities. You're a scanner listener, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We were woken up by this rumble.
Right.
Today we were trying to sleep in on Saturday, and we heard this sounded like a train going through our property. We have 240 acres, and it sounded like it was in, the driveway.
Yeah. What's next in that part of the world? Do you have any sense
We're
of
in
any?
East Texas. We're kind of in between Houston and Dallas.
What I'm trying to get a sense of what's going on right now. You're getting a sense that there's any sort of search or rescue effort underway at the moment?
Yes, there's a tremendous effort underway. All the counties on the scanner, you can hear them. They're finding debris from all over the place.
I wonder if you could put your phone up to one of those scanners for us and keep us. Is there a way you could do that for us so we can hear it?
I'm trying to get here.
Yeah. Are they talking about it right now?
Now they're not. It's not. Earlier there was somebody that had reported in Zavala that there was something huge. Couldn't tell because of the tremendous fog. The fog has now lifted, so any debris should be quite visible.
You said it was foggy at the time then, huh?
Yes, tremendous fog. The haze was reported at one time that there was probably not even a half a mile visibility. On our property, I couldn't see very far.
Have you heard anything on those scanners that gives you any sense that anybody was injured on the ground?
I did not hear of any injuries. I only heard of a bunch of debris being found in different places. One gentleman supposedly pulled off of Highway 69 near Zavala, near the lake, the fishing lake down in Zavala, because he had seen debris falling.
I see. Okay. Well, would you do us a favor? Keep an open line to us, and if you would listen to those scanners for us, and if you hear anything, or if you can put a tape recorder on it so we can hear what's going on, we'd appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, stay on the line. All right, who else do we have with us? No response. I will assume that means nobody. So let's take a... I don't know who this is. Who is this, please?
This is Benjamin Laster.
Benjamin,
Yes.
Good to have you with us. I'm sorry I'm not getting a lot of guidance out here as to who's on the line, so I apologize. Benjamin, you are from Central Texas as well?
Yes, I'm in between 7 Points and Kemp, Texas. And my wife and I, my wife had said the shuttle would be coming over. And so my wife and I and my child went outside, along with my dad, and we seen the shuttle coming over. And as we seen it coming over, we seen a lot of light, and it looks like debris and stuff was coming off of the shuttle. But they said, "Look at this stuff coming off the shuttle." And I said, "That's probably the shields on the shuttle that keep it from when it enters, not to get too hot."
Yeah.
And so as we kept looking, we we seen it out the back door, and we come to the front door, and we seen large masses of pieces coming off of the shuttle. And as it was coming by, we also noticed, because it seemed awful close, a plane pretty close to it, but we didn't see any kind of impact.
All right, Benjamin, I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you because I'm having a hard time hearing you? They keep talking to me. Did you say there's a plane nearby?
It was a plane nearby the shuttle as it was going.
No, I'm not talking to the producer in the control room. Please be quiet in the control room for 1 minute. I want to talk to Benjamin. Benjamin, you said a plane was nearby?
It seemed like a plane was nearby. It sure did. As it was going by, I said, ooh, that's awful close. That's what we said, that plane being that close.
What sort of plane, Benjamin?
It looked like a commercial jet. I mean, it was...
Oh, all right. So this could have just been a coincidence, seeing it. Or would you normally see a commercial jet in that area at where you saw it?
I guess you would, but not that close to the shuttle. I mean,
when you say how close to the shuttle, how close do you mean?
Well, I mean, looking from where I was looking, it seemed like they were awful close, and I mean, it just seemed like they was awful close, like it could have been even a close call. But
really?
We didn't notice anything from there. But then after we was on the front porch, the house kind of shook, and we noticed a sonic boom. That kind of shook the house. At least we thought it was a sonic boom, but I don't know. And then we seen a big continuous puff of vapor or smoke stream come out, and then we noticed a big chunk go over, and that's what we saw.
All right, Benjamin Lester joining us from that part of Central Texas. And we should caution our viewers, and this is no reflection on Mr. Lester or anybody else we're going to be hearing from, but frequently we get witness accounts at this juncture of any incident, plane crash, whatever it may be, that do not bear themselves out. The fact that an airplane was nearby, I should tell you that the space shuttle was at an altitude of 200,000 feet. So even if there was a commercial airliner or any sort of airplane in that area, it would have been significantly lower. So we'll just leave that at that. Thank you, Benjamin. Let's go to CNN's Suzanne Malveaux at the White House. And apparently the president has been at Camp David. They've set up a bit of a task force within the government to try to go through all this and get a sense of what happened. And he will be on his way to the White House right around the noon hour to, get a full... his hands on the reins here in order to get a sense of what's going on and how to proceed as the investigation begins very early. Now, Gene Meserve told us, and it's very, I want to caution that we mention terrorism in this day and age always when things like this happen, because the sad fact is that is a part of our life right now. But the initial indication that we have from Gene Meserve, who covers Homeland Security for us, and from just plain common sense, is that a shuttle streaking along as it is right now, 6 times the speed of sound, 200,000 feet, is not in a place where it could become a target of terrorism. Let's go to Suzanne Malveaux at the White House now. Suzanne, tell us about what the president is doing right now.
Well, the president is heading back to the White House. As you know, he was to spend the weekend at Camp David. He was notified of the situation earlier this morning. We are told that they are trying to get as much information as possible, but they realized how serious it was, and it was the best decision that the president come back here to the White House to monitor situations here. As you can imagine, it is a very serious tone here at the White House. We have seen administration officials, we've seen staffers rushing back here once they heard the news. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of activity here later in the day. We have not been told yet whether or not there's going to be any type of formal briefing, but as you can imagine, there are certainly signs of people who are very concerned here at the White House. They are taking it very seriously, and as I indicated before, the president is heading back here to the White House later this afternoon. Miles.
Suzanne Malveaux at the White House, please keep us posted on all of this. We got some still photographs which we'd like to share with you. We've been showing you that video, but in some cases still photographs tell a story in a different way for us. And these come from a viewer who emailed them to us here. If you take a look at this first shot, I'll highlight it if assuming it is through the telestrator now, and I'm hoping that's the case. You see the shuttle right there. What's significant about this is that is exactly what you would expect to see. Like a bright dot, and then one the term contrail doesn't really apply because that's kind of streaking plasma, superheated, ionized air. I don't want to get too technical with you, but that's basically what we're talking about at that altitude. Now, I believe this next one is the next one in the series, although I'm not positive. What you see there is a very bright flash right at the center there. Clearly something very, as NASA's term would be, extremely dynamic occurred at that point. What you also see are a series of little dots all around. I don't want to cover it over, so I'll take it out. But you see those little dots? That is debris. And clearly that is, there's no mistaking what that is. That is in-flight breakup, straight and forward. And finally, although I'm not sure this is the correct order, what you see are two very significant targets right there. Two big pieces, separated, breakup, 200,000 feet, 6 times the speed of sound. The crew, 7 people. 7 people who all dreamed of flying to space and dreamed of doing what they're doing. The crew led by Commander Rick Husband and supported by his pilot, William Willie McCool. And as we look at more pictures, this is the WFAA tape, which shows you what I just showed you in still form. All right. We have, we're getting all kinds of, let's listen to James Hartsfield in Houston for a minute, if we could.
Mission control as a result of the loss of communication with the Space Shuttle Columbia this morning at approximately 8 a.m. Central Time as Columbia was descending toward a landing in Florida. At the time, Columbia was at an altitude of approximately 200,000 feet above north central Texas. No communications or tracking from Columbia has been received by Mission Control since that time. Search and rescue authorities in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and in portions of East Texas and other pertinent areas have been alerted to the Space Shuttle contingency. Any debris that is found that may be related to the Space Shuttle's contingency should be avoided and may be hazardous due to the toxic nature of propellants that are used on board the Space Shuttle. The locations of any possible debris should be reported immediately to local law enforcement authorities. In Mission Control, flight controllers continue through contingency procedures designed to secure all information, data, and notes pertinent to today's descent of the Space Shuttle Columbia. This is Mission Control, Houston.
Call any of those people. All right, that was James Hartsfield in Houston giving us an update, public affairs officer for NASA. Sitting in the control room, you see screen left, screen right, you see tape of the final minutes of the Space Shuttle Columbia on its 28th flight coming down, the 113th shuttle mission. Greg Soule is on the line, and he is in the I know who he is. He's the Public Information Officer. That's okay. Thank you, Control Room. I appreciate your help. Greg Soules, Public Information Officer, who's joining us from Nacogdoches County in Texas. Greg, what can you tell us?
Well, we have several pieces of debris that have been reported as coming down within the city of Nacogdoches. Each and every one that we have reported to us, we're sending officers out to stand by with. We're holding these areas secure until we receive further instructions from the federal government.
How many sites are you aware of?
I don't have an exact number. All I know is there are several at this point.
And do you have any sense of how, I mean, at 200,000 feet traveling that fast, I imagine the debris field could stretch for many, many miles. Do you have any sense of it?
I have no idea where else. All I know is we have some within the city of Nacogdoches, and again, we're asking the public if they find it to call us and stay away from it.
And do you have any reports, Mr. Soule, of any injuries on the ground?
No, not from here at this time, no.
Okay. Is this a fairly thinly settled area?
Well, we're a university town of approximately 30,000 people. It's a small town, but then it's not a large town. And the areas that we're finding these, of course, are in town, but they're like we're finding some in the middle of the road and things like that. But we have not had any reports of any damage or any injuries as of yet.
Okay. And did you see or hear anything personally?
No, sir, did not.
Okay. And have you heard first-person accounts from people there?
No.
Okay. And give us a sense of how much assistance you're receiving from outside right now.
Well, at this point, we're just beginning to gear up. We're fixing to activate our emergency operations center with the city, and that's all that's forthcoming right now. Like I say, there's several of us doing 3 jobs until we get everyone in.
Have you had any contact with federal authorities?
I have not personally. I know we've been in contact with the FBI, yes.
Okay, the FBI. All right. Greg Soule with the Nacogdoches County authorities there, public information officer, on the line with us, giving a sense of what is happening on the ground there in central Texas, which is, the shuttle was about 200,000 feet above central Texas when it broke up. We can only imagine the debris field is going to be rather spread out and extensive, and we caution those of you who listen to us and can hear us now, by all means please do not touch anything you suspect to be debris from the space shuttle. It could be very hazardous. There's a toxic brew of chemicals inside these shuttles, nitrogen tetroxide, hydrazine, which can cause you all kinds of health problems, short-term and long-term. It can burn you, it can give you cancer. All of the thrusters on the space shuttle, you see these little black dots down here in the end, these are where the thrusters are powered in this combination of hydrogen and nitrogen tetroxide. And it is nasty stuff. And a space shuttle is just a witch's brew of those kinds of things. And you would be putting yourself in great peril if you were to pick up or handle any piece of the shuttle. It's federal property. You also might find yourself answering to authorities. So please let it be. Pick up the phone. Let's listen to James Hartsfield one more time in Houston, please.
Through contingency plans designed to secure all information and data pertinent to today's descent by the Space Shuttle Columbia. Communications with the Space Shuttle Columbia were lost at approximately 8 a.m. Central Time this morning at an altitude of about 200,000 feet above north central Texas, as Columbia was en route to a landing planned at 8:16 a.m. Central Time at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. At the time communication was lost, Columbia was traveling approximately 12,500 miles per hour. Search and rescue teams in the Dallas-Fort Worth vicinity and in portions of East Texas and other pertinent areas have been alerted to the Space Shuttle contingency.
All right, we're listening to James Hartsfield.
Debris that may be related to the Space Shuttle contingency that is located should be avoided and may be hazardous due to the toxic nature of propellants.
All right, he's restating what I just told you. Let's bring him down if we could. James Hartsfield is a public affairs officer for NASA. He's sitting in a console there at Mission Control, giving us the latest on what we know. The shuttle was traveling at 12,500 miles an hour. It's hard to even imagine that kind of speed. We're talking about something that exceeds the speed of a bullet when you're seeing what you're seeing now at an altitude of 200,000 feet. Tremendous pressure and forces on the craft at that moment. Now, granted, the air is thin there, and the idea is to ease the shuttle in, slow down as you come in, and ease that, gradually apply the brakes, if you will, but a tremendous amount of pressure. Now, the Space Shuttle fleet was designed to fly 100 missions each. Each airframe was certified to fly 100 missions, and to date, the entire fleet has flown 113 missions. This was Columbia's 28th flight, and thus it is well below what would have been its useful capacity, at least as an airframe. The target in all of this, the landing site, if you want to just take a look at it, we could just give you a sense of where they head to. 15 minutes from where it broke up, the Space Shuttle deorbit burn begins over the Indian Ocean, and the brakes just keep coming as they come down for the world's most harrowing glider ride is really a good way to describe it. As we zoom in on the Kennedy Space Center, and what you see here is those are the launch pads. That's where Columbia left from 16 days ago. That's the big vehicle assembly building. That's where we view the launches, right in that spot right there. There's about, just to give you a scale, there's 3 miles in between those two sites. That's as close as anybody gets to a space shuttle launch, except for the crash team. And the crash team sits about a mile away right there. Zooming in here, you see the vehicle assembly building, and down the runway. This is runway 33, which is where the space shuttle was headed. It's a northwest to southeast runway, 15,000 feet in length. Not too terribly much longer than what you'd find at a big international airport, but much wider, 300 feet wide. Space Shuttle Columbia never made it to its intended destination today. Let's get CNN's Patty Davis on with us. Patty, what can you tell us?
Well, Miles, the FAA is saying that it had not had any contact with the shuttle. That shuttle, of course, at about 200,000 feet when it appears to have broken up. The FAA air traffic control would have come into play at about 60,000 feet, and I'm told it would have directed the aircraft in just like any other aircraft that it was bringing in. But it just did not get to that point. Now, the NTSB would most likely play a role in this accident investigation in the Shuttle Challenger accident. It had a technical advisor role, most likely would have that same type of role in this instance. Now, one safety expert, a former NTSB official, telling me what probably you'll need to look at here, since terrorism seems unlikely here, is an aging aircraft issue. Now, I know, Miles, you said these shuttles meant to fly about 100 missions, but this particular shuttle, some 22 years old, and this former NTSB official saying that certainly the age here could have played a role. Now, as far as terrorism is concerned, now for commercial aircraft, one of the things that officials have been worried about recently is surface-to-air missiles. We're told that, however, that the highest, even the most sophisticated of those surface-to-air missiles could only reach about 60,000 feet in the air. So not particularly a factor, not likely to be a factor in this case. One safety expert saying perhaps that the only way terrorism could have played a role here, something had been placed on board perhaps. Miles?
All right, let's listen in James Hartsfield one more time. Let's see if he has any news for us. James Hartsfield, Public Affairs Officer in Houston. Let's listen.
At approximately 8 a.m. Central Time, as it flew at an altitude of 200,000 feet and a speed of approximately 12,500 miles per hour toward a planned landing at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Touchdown for Columbia was scheduled for 8:16 a.m. Central Time in Florida.
All right. He appears to be
search and rescue teams in the
recapping what we know. So we'll bring James down, and we have with us on the line as we let's show that videotape if we can again. It's stunning videotape captured by our affiliate WFAA out of Dallas. Specifically, the man with the camera hoisted on his shoulder was John Prague. John, are you with us?
Yes.
John, I don't know how much experience you have with space and shuttles, but did you have the sense as you watched this that something was amiss?
Well, I'd seen the shuttle once before on reentry. I was in West Texas, and I heard it, sonic boom, and I saw it pass over with the one contrail. So, yes, when I saw all these contrails with reflective material in the early morning sky, it did seem unusual, but I have limited experience seeing the shuttle on reentry. So,
yeah.
Appear, and even our anchor made mention of it. We did a live shot at a little after 8 o'clock when it came over Dallas-Fort Worth.
And we're talking about 8 o'clock Central Time here, just to clarify for our viewers out there who are in various time zones. John, what did you hear as you were shooting that? Do you recall?
I didn't hear anything.
You were pretty far away, of course.
Yes. We were listening to NASA. They were giving us updates on where the shuttle was, and so we could get an idea when it would come over Dallas-Fort Worth. We heard it that it was coming over Northern California, then Arizona, and then El Paso. And at that point, I started watching for it, of course. And suddenly it appeared, and so I turned my camera on and started to roll video, and we shot it live as it came over Dallas-Fort Worth.
And at what point then did you have some realization that something went wrong?
When I came back into the station, they were saying it was overdue, and that's when we started to re-roll the tape, and then information started coming out of NASA. But it wasn't until I actually got back in the newsroom that people were saying, well, it's overdue.
John Prock, videographer, WFAA, our affiliate in Texas. John Prock, we thank you for your efforts in giving us this insight in the immediate aftermath of the demise of the Space Shuttle Columbia, breaking up into several pieces there. Let's recap for those who are just joining us. As John mentioned, the Space Shuttle Columbia was at the tail end of a 16-day science mission, 7-person crew. They were headed back home, and somewhere over central Texas, 100 miles south of Dallas or thereabouts, this is what happened here. If you take a look here, you'll see what starts out normally quickly becomes multiple trails there, multiple trails. That's something that is very telling, and no mistaking that that is an in-flight breakup. The question as to why is another matter entirely, which we couldn't get into without getting very deep into the world of speculation. But that shot tells you what happened. Why it happened will be the subject of discussion for months and perhaps years to come. But here we go. Let's take a look at the shot now. I want to call your attention. Watch that fireball. That's normal. One streak, very hot, coming from orbit, 2,000 plus degrees, dissipating heat. Boom! Look at that piece come off, and then shortly thereafter, flash. See that flash right in there? And then a piece of smoke came off, a puff of smoke. Something happened there. So something happened first, then second, and then as it went along, further breakup. Sort of a three-step process. A small piece, a flash, and then very shortly thereafter, multiple pieces of the Space Shuttle Columbia, at that point traveling 12,500 miles an hour. Just to give you a sense of it, they travel around the planet at about 17,500 miles an hour. So having lost 5,000 miles an hour of speed already, still traveling the speed of a bullet. Let's take a look at the crew and tell you who was on board for this 16-day science mission. The commander, Rick Husband. If we can get some pictures up of them, that would be appreciated. Do we have the pictures? There we go. There's the crew. If you put that in Telestrator, I'll tell people who's who. Commander is Rick Husband, and I don't have it in the Telestrator, so I can just tell you. Oh, yeah, there's Rick Husband, and he is a colonel in the United States Air Force. And he was born July 12th, 1957, from Amarillo, Texas. Truly the pride of Amarillo, Texas. On his second mission, his first mission, he flew as a shuttle pilot, STS-96, aboard Discovery in May of 1999. They went to the International Space Station. Unusual, quite frankly, for these days for pilots to rise to the level of commander on their second flight, but Rick Husband was an unusually good guy and a sharp guy at that. Also on board, and this is Ilan Ramon, colonel in the Israeli Air Force. This was the first Israeli ever to fly in space, the son of a Holocaust survivor who spoke to us, and we're trying to get some of these interviews together that we shot with him beforehand. We're hopeful that we'll have them for you shortly so you can hear from them in their own words, but spoke to us at length about what this meant to his country and how his country, having endured the Holocaust, could not have fathomed an Israeli traveling in space, looking down upon the Middle East and the rest of the world. Also on this flight, Michael Anderson, lieutenant, colonel in the United States Air Force, Plattsburgh, New York, his home. He was flying on his second mission. He flew in January of '98 on STS-89. Space Shuttle Endeavour flew to Mir. Although he is a person who sort of sat in the back of the shuttle and did mission specialist duties, has a lot of experience with flight in KC-135s and certainly with T-38s. Also on this particular mission, Laurel Clark, medical doctor, as you can see plainly there. Laurel hails from Racine, Wisconsin. Came to NASA in 1996, her first mission. Along with them, the pilot person sits in the right-hand seat, right beside Rick Husband. William Willie McCool, Navy commander, born September of 1961, came from San Diego. Reported to NASA in '96. This was his first flight. A man who was familiar with carrier landings, worked out of Whidbey Island, and flying the EA-6B Prowler, which you might be familiar with. Also on the Space Shuttle Columbia. David Brown, captain in the United States Navy, out of Arlington, Virginia. Pilot himself, although he wasn't sitting in the front seats of the controls of the shuttle. He's a mission specialist. 2,700 hours in high-performance military aircraft. His first flight as well. Kalpana Chawla, born in Kamarl, India, is an astronaut with some experience in 1996, STS-87, U.S. microgravity payload scientific mission. She operated the robotic arm on that particular mission. PhD, and for fun, she used to fly aerobatic airplanes, tailwheel aerobatic airplanes. That was her passion in addition to space flight. There's the crew, and I was commenting about the suits that they're wearing there, those orange suits, those so-called pumpkin suits, launch and re-entry suits, they call them. Those suits were not worn in the years immediately after the first few missions up to Challenger. The crew went up in essentially a flight suit, just a jumpsuit, not a pressure suit. They wore helmets, but they didn't have the pressure suit. One of the reforms that came out of the Challenger accident was that these suits would be worn by the crew members as they rose to space and as they came back home. The idea being that if there was some sort of rapid decompression, loss of cabin atmosphere inside the flight deck and the mid deck, that the crew could survive. But as we pointed out not too long ago, as we pointed out not too long ago, this is not a situation where the crew would even have the option of bailing out. That altitude, that speed, is not a goal. Let's listen to James Hartsfield one more time. Houston.
Continue through Space Shuttle contingency procedures designed to secure all information, notes, and data pertinent to today's descent by the Space Shuttle Columbia. Communications were lost with the Space Shuttle Columbia at approximately 8 a.m. Central Time, as Columbia was above north central Texas at an altitude of 200,000 feet, traveling approximately 12,500 miles per hour. Search and rescue forces in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and in other portions along Columbia's planned route have been alerted to the Space Shuttle program contingency. Any debris that may be
All right, we're going to bring James Hartsfield down because it's a bit repetitive. If you've been watching, you know what he's going to say, which is don't touch any debris that you might see if you happen to be in that part of the world. Stay away from it. It could hurt you, could potentially kill you, and it's against the law to touch it, so don't do it. Let's go now to Jerusalem and Kelly Wallace. Kelly, Ilan Ramon, in many ways the pride of Israel.
Miles, exactly, the pride of Israel, and so as you might imagine, tremendous sadness, shock, and emotion throughout the country right now. A colleague of mine was talking to a top representative at Israel's space agency, and his quote is, "We are in shock." We know that Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, we are told, was watching events unfold on television like most of us were. His spokesman saying the Prime Minister watching those events. No formal official reaction, though, coming from the Israeli government until there is a formal announcement from NASA and from the American government. But we can tell you that when Colonel Ilan Ramon took off on the space shuttle, there was tremendous excitement in Israel. It was front page news on the Israeli newspapers, on the Israeli television stations. Really a lot of joy. As you know, Miles, a lot of sadness in this country. There has been tremendous violence over the past few months. Lots of concern about that. There were the elections just a few days ago. Not a lot of excitement about that, but this was looked at as tremendous joy and pride. Colonel Ramon, we know, is married, has 4 children. His father, in fact, we understand, was watching some of the events on television at an Israeli television station a short time ago. We believe he has since left and headed to his home. Colonel Ramon has tremendous experience, more than 3,000 flight hours. Also, he took part in a mission back in 1981, a mission destroying the nuclear reactor in Iraq. He also took part in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. So tremendous pride in Colonel Ramon, and right now people are just still, Miles, holding out hope that this will turn out, but right now tremendous sadness throughout Israel.
It's hard to imagine the depth of sadness as we just sort of absorb all of this, Kelly, and it's difficult to even assess it. here, but there, I think, in a very profound way, a lot of hopes and dreams were flying with Ilan Ramon.
Exactly. The representative from the space agency, again, talking to my colleague a short time ago, saying really everything is lost. All the work, all the experimentation, a lot of dreams, as you said. And again, the symbol really, this being the first Israeli astronaut in space, and also coming in the context of a very difficult time. This has been more than 2 years of violence in this country, the start of the second Palestinian Intifada against Israel. The economy is dismal right now. Lots of concern about the violence, the state of the situation, the future. And again, Miles, just looking at the media attention, looking at television and newspaper coverage of this, it was really looked at by many as one piece of really good news in a sea of a lot of bad news over the past few months, Miles.
It's stunningly tragic. Please, Kelly, stay close. Let us know what you hear from the government, what you hear on the streets. Of course, we're all harking back to the last time this happened. 17 years ago this past week, we marked the anniversary of the Space Shuttle Challenger and its explosion. A little more than a minute after liftoff from the Kennedy Space Center, 7-member crew died there. We marked that anniversary this past week. Tom Mentier, CNN correspondent, was live on the air at that moment, has covered numerous shuttle missions over the years. Tom, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts go to the families of the 7 astronauts aboard Columbia, the family, the friends, the loved ones, immediately first. As you're well aware, the most 2 dangerous times are ascent and descent. And I asked them if we had the animation of not only the ascent but the descent when at maximum pressure and maximum velocity, the shuttle turns red hot underneath as it re-enters the atmosphere. And what you're seeing now in these pictures, the heat is just absolutely tremendous. And as you pointed out, the multiple targets, by seeing different pieces, it is something we, of course, have seen before, but not in the same dynamics that we saw this morning. But very, very difficult to watch, not once, but a second time for me.
Yeah, take us back to that day and what that was like and what happened in the immediate aftermath.
Well, the investigation, I was there for the search for the debris, which I'm sure there would have been larger pieces because they weren't as high up in the atmosphere as they were on this one. But the investigation is going to center around this debris field that you talk about being across a very wide area of West Texas. I'm sure that the pieces that they find will not be very large. The initial descriptions that we've been hearing from West Texas are very small pieces of debris. But it's going to be a very slow, long investigation that takes a look at the airframe. As you mentioned, these airframes are certified for 100 missions. And, of course, Columbia nowhere near that. But, again, certification and what occurs in flight or after flight, as we found out with Challenger, are not necessarily what's written in the books.
Well, it's worth pointing out to our viewers, and I know, Tom, you are well aware of this, 20-plus years after Columbia first flew, the first shuttle to fly, this is still an experimental vehicle, an experimental program. This is not an airliner, is it?
No, it's not. And every time these astronauts strap themselves in for a mission, they realize the dangers that they are about to face. They train for it for months, if not years, before they fly, while they're flying, and while they're returning. They know what the dangers are that they're facing in this program.
They do. They do understand it. Tom, if you could stay close, we may want to check in with you in just a moment. I think probably this might be a good time to hear from some of the crew members. We, of course, interviewed them before they left and got a sense of their excitement for their mission, their zest for their job. A lot of them would tell you it really wasn't a job. Let's listen to Michael Anderson.
Well, unfortunately, this mission is so packed with scientific experiments and everything. As a matter of fact, when we return, we'll be the heaviest space shuttle ever to land. So there's not a lot of room to take anything personal or special with you on this flight. So basically, I'm just going to take my notebook with my notes and a couple extra pens and pencils.
All right, Michael Anderson. we spoke to all the crew before they left, and as they always do, we asked them about the risks. We asked them about their philosophy on the risks, and to a person they say it's all worth it. Let's listen to Rick Husband, the commander.
The shuttle is a great vehicle. It is so impressive every time I sit down and study the different systems to see how well thought out this vehicle is and how well it works every time we go and fly. The fleet actually is probably only reached about a quarter of its design life. So on our particular flight, this will be the 28th flight of Columbia, and each of the airframes was designed for 100 flights. So there's still a lot of life left in the shuttle fleet, and it is, I would say, a tribute to the people who work on the shuttle in the inspections that they do, in being able to find some very minor flaws like what we're talking about here, because they do a fantastic job in doing the inspections and finding these things. And it's just like it's just kind of like normal upkeep and maintenance like you would have on your car, except that this is a much larger system. And so it is a very impressive, and certainly by myself very much appreciated, that the people are so diligent and do such a great job in keeping track of all those things.
Kind of hard to hear all those words right at this moment, but those words are all still well true. What was not added is that this is stuff that is still on the edge of the envelope, that term that test pilots use, pushing the envelope, the edge of our capabilities as human beings, is manifested in what you see right here in this space shuttle, even 20 plus years after it first flew. But I should point out something that was mentioned a while ago, and I didn't get a chance to mention it, that the concept that a space shuttle is old is a bit of a fallacy. They are certified, as we said, for 100 flights. Columbia was on our 28th mission. Every fourth or fifth mission, they go through an overhaul, which is really almost right down to the spars and aluminum, where they truly make the shuttle new. In the case of Columbia, it had, for example, a brand new glass cockpit installed as part of its last overhaul. So it is, to call it old is a bit of a myth. These are the most pampered aircraft or spacecraft, whatever you want to call it, in the world. And they're treated as such. When they say 100 missions on that airframe, that's conservative even on its own. So at 28 missions, Columbia was, in fact, sure, the old gray lady, having first flown in April. We're looking at, also, you obviously can see here, this is Challenger. It's the only model I have.
The future does not belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. And brave these 7 were. From CNN. Good night.
She's the first one in the family to go to college. Full scholarship. 4 years. Thing is, it's 25 miles away.
We're Household, and we've helped over 700,000 people who need cars get cars. Because for nearly 125 years, we've understood the hopes and financial needs of everyday people. Household, helping everyday people every day.
Mr. Stevens?
Yeah.
Got you down for over 130 channels, $39.99 a month.
Right. So
every channel's digital quality. There's access to 31 premium movie channels, 60 pay-per-view movie titles a month.
great. So that can go on the back of the roof?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, good. So go ahead and pull around back.
You work for the cable company, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why settle for cable? Switch to DirecTV and get over 130 channels, only $39.99 a month. Call 1-800-DirecTV or visit a participating retailer now.
What is it?
It's a magic business lamp.
We got it in the merger.
You rub it and the business genius 3 wishes.
Cut overhead.
Improve service.
Lamp.
Yeah.
It's for you.
It's the genie.
Hi.
final moments before a national tragedy. Heading home, Shuttle Columbia breaks up in midair.
At 9 o'clock this morning, Mission Control in Houston lost contact with our Space Shuttle Columbia. A short time later, debris was seen falling from the skies above Texas. The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors.
7 crew members lost. NASA officials begin a daunting investigation.
My promise to the crew and to the crew families is that the investigation that we have just launched will find the cause, we'll fix it, and then we'll move on.
Tonight, a CNN special report, Columbia, a shuttle tragedy. From the CNN Center in Atlanta, here's Miles O'Brien.
Good evening. In the 42 years of U.S. human spaceflight, there had never been a fatal accident during the descent to Earth or in landing. But this morning, that all changed. 16 minutes before it was scheduled to touch down in Florida at the Kennedy Space Center, the Space Shuttle Columbia fell apart in the skies over Texas. You're looking at some animation developed through the good graces of analytical graphics, and what you see is the general scenario that occurs on re-entry as a space shuttle returns from space, traveling at some 17,500 miles an hour, breaking its way toward the runway at the Kennedy Space Center in the Florida Peninsula, pitching nose high up, presenting to the strongest portion of the heat those black tiles there to insulate the space shuttle, which is, after all, an aluminum frame aircraft, from the 3,000 degree heat of re-entry. It was at the absolute apex of that heat, Mach 18, 200,000 feet and change, when the Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrated high over Texas. This scenario is being watched very closely in Houston right now. There is a mission evaluation team right now poring over data which was captured immediately after it became apparent that there was a catastrophic failure of the Space Shuttle Columbia. I'm told that mission managers will be looking very closely and the engineers will be looking closely at what happened to the elevons. These are the flaps in the rear portion of the Space Shuttle Columbia. There is some indication based on the preliminary look at the data that there was some unusual movement by these elevons, perhaps something that might have caused an abrupt maneuver very early in this investigation, but that is one of the things being looked at as they burn the midnight oil in Houston in the mission evaluation room. In the morning, there will be a series of meetings, 8 a.m. local time, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., series of management meetings and engineering meetings to look at the data preliminarily, get a sense of where they're headed, and then in the noon hour Central Time, they will report back to reporters with another briefing to give us a better sense of where they're headed with this investigation, still obviously in the very early hours. Coming up in the next hour of this program, extensive coverage of the Columbia tragedy and what might have gone wrong. Also anchoring tonight's coverage, Wolf Blitzer live at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Lou Dobbs from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and following the Bush administration's reaction, Judy Woodruff in Washington. First, let's quickly update you on the very latest. All future space shuttle flights are now on hold until NASA gets a better grip on what went so terribly wrong this morning, as you see in these pictures, breaking up south of Dallas. Space Agency officials say not to worry, though, about crew members still aboard the International Space Station. They have enough supplies to last until June. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has been put in charge of recovering and collecting the debris over a tremendously wide swath of the continental United States. The military has been called in to help that search. They're concentrating on eastern Texas. Bits and pieces of the shuttle have also been found in parts of Louisiana. And experts say that because Columbia broke up at 200,000 feet, the debris field could extend to even into Arkansas, Arizona, and New Mexico. Outside NASA headquarters and at the White House, flags flying at half-staff, a tribute to the 7 astronauts on board the Space Shuttle Columbia. Many of the crew's relatives were at the Kennedy Space Center excitedly waiting the touchdown, a touchdown which never came after a 16-day science mission which by all accounts was nearly flawless. This was the 28th mission for the Space Shuttle Columbia, focused on science as we told you, and Israel's first astronaut in space.
3, 2, 1. We have booster ignition and liftoff of Space Shuttle Columbia with a multitude of national and international space research experiments.
10:39 a.m., January 16th. Columbia takes
Houston
off.
now controlling the flight of Columbia, the international research mission finally underway. Commander Rick Husband joined on the flight deck by pilot Willie McCool, flight engineer Kalpana Chawla, and mission specialist Dave Brown. Mission specialist Laurel Clark, payload commander Mike Anderson, and payload specialist Ilan Ramon seated down on the middeck.
10:41 a.m. About 80 seconds into the flight, a piece of debris on the external fuel tank comes off, hitting the underside of the orbiter left wing. There is some concern about overheating during re-entry if enough tiles are knocked loose. But after studying the images frame by frame, NASA engineers decide to continue the mission. 3:10 p.m., January 25th, 1 week into the mission. The crew gives CNN an update from space.
Here we had a great ride to orbit, and all the activation of the experiments in the space hab went extremely well. And we're really, we've got our space legs and up and running.
Another week passes. Saturday morning, February 1st. The crew is just hours from returning home.
Good morning, Houston. We're getting ready for a big day up here. Had a great time on orbit and really excited to come back home.
8:15 a.m. While still in orbit, Columbia fires its braking rockets. Its touchdown sequence is underway. It begins re-entry. 8:59 a.m. Mission Control hears from Columbia for the last time.
And Columbia, Houston, we see your tire pressure messages, and we did not copy your last.
Roger.
9 a.m., just 16 minutes away from its scheduled touchdown on Florida's East Coast, Mission Control in Houston loses all data and voice contact with Columbia. The shuttle is seen in the skies above Dallas, Texas. At this point, the spacecraft is roughly 203,000 feet above the Earth, traveling about 12,500 miles an hour. Residents across Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana see what NASA is not yet talking about.
We were woken up by this rumble. Today we were trying to sleep in on Saturday, and we heard this, sounded like a train going through our property. The dogs started barking and then got shook the earth.
And we've seen large masses of pieces coming off of the shuttle.
I'm devastated. It's unbelievable.
And the National Weather Service even picks up these images on radar.
That is the wreckage of the shuttle Columbia coming through.
9:20. Quiet disbelief in the control room in Houston and from onlookers at the Kennedy Space Center.
We're shocked. We at a loss for words. We don't know what to think. We feel so sad and sorry for the families of people that have been lost. Just hope they're with God.
9:29 a.m. NASA declares an emergency. Calls reporting debris hitting the ground flood police, NASA, and newsroom phones. 9:44 a.m. NASA warns residents to stay away from the debris, which could be dangerous because of toxins in the propellants used. 11 a.m. A flag at the Kennedy Space Center next to the countdown clock is lowered to half staff. 1:30 p.m. NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe.
We trust that the prayers of the nation will be with them and with their families. And again, a more courageous group of people you could not have hoped to know than the families of these crew members. And an extraordinary, extraordinary group of astronauts who gave their lives.
2:05. The President addresses the nation, delivering the gravest news.
This day has brought terrible news and great sadness to our country. The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors.
At Mission Control in Houston, the first indication of trouble this morning was the loss of temperature sensors on Columbia's left wing, almost as if the plug had been pulled. This was followed within seconds by a series of other problems. Wolf Blitzer joining us live now from the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Wolf.
Miles, as you well know, this is a small family, all the people involved in this mission control operation here, and there's tremendous sadness, especially severe sadness here because the 7 astronauts had trained here in Houston at the Johnson Space Center. Their families, by and large, were here. They had spent a long time getting ready for this mission, and everyone here is, as they've said to me, the words can't describe how upset, how sad they are at what's going on, and spontaneous memorial services are erupting even outside the gates of the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas. Now, they are urging the public to try to help if they can. They know there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of pieces of debris out there. They know that the public saw the images of the debris landing in central Texas, northern Texas, all over here, all the way over to Louisiana. They are asking, anyone has any film, any video, there's two ways of getting in touch with NASA officials. You can either call them at a number we've been putting up on the screen, 281-483-3388. I'll repeat that, 281-483-3388. Or you can email them if you believe you have some information that could help the investigators. Their email address is ColumbiaImages@nasa.gov. Columbia Images, all one word, @nasa.gov. Now, Ed Lavandera has been out there in Texas. He's been talking to people who've seen some of the debris. Ed Lavandera is joining us now live from Nacogdoches. Ed, tell us what you've seen and what you've heard.
Well, Wolf, what we've seen throughout the day is many people, actually closer to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, many people were paying attention to this shuttle landing today. Just kind of the course of events today, kind of everything lined up nicely. It was a beautiful day here, weather-wise, in Texas, and many people were able to see one of those great moments where you could see the space shuttle streaking across the state of Texas as it was headed toward Florida for its final approach. And so a lot of people watching the live coverage on the local newscast that as the shuttle was streaking overhead here. So that was a very strange moment, not something, a very unique moment, I should say, not a chance a lot of people get to see. So we're about 3.5 hours southeast of the Dallas-Fort Worth area and about another 3 hours north of Houston to kind of pinpoint you. And we're in the center of Nacogdoches, Texas. And this has kind of become a nerve center, if you will, for a lot of people who have come here. And the reason they're here is this one parking lot is there's just a 3 by 3 foot piece of debris there. And this is very significant of what we've seen throughout the East Texas area. In people's backyards, driveways, sidewalks, the back roads of East Texas have seen small parts of debris like this scattered all over the place. And we've seen the area is cordoned off just like this, and many times we've often seen private landowners there doing the same, waiting for authorities to come by and pick up this material. We understand that trying to line up the process by how exactly they're going to do this. I've also had a chance to speak with other people who say that they have seen debris in the back of their businesses or in their homes as well, and that I guess there's just so many calls that have been coming into the authorities here in the East Texas area that it's been impossible to get somebody out to all of these locations at this point so far. So there's a lot of work still left to do here. Wolf?
And do people understand, by and large, how dangerous it is, these toxic propellants, as they call it, that if anybody gets too close or touches the kind of debris, they could be in trouble? By and large, has that message gotten through?
You know, for the most part, I have seen that you'll be driving around a neighborhood and you'll see a piece of debris on the ground, and what you'll see is a lot of people gathered around, but they'll keep a safe distance from it, not touching it. A lot of people taking pictures of it, but for the most part, I think that word has gotten out that people should stay away.
And it is, of course, the property of the United States government. It would be a crime for anyone to take any of that debris with them. CNN's Ed Lavandera is joining us from Nacogdoches in Texas. Thanks very much, Ed. And Miles, when I throw it back to you, as you well know, the investigators want to collect as much of that debris as possible. It's unclear whether they're going to try to recreate as best they can the Columbia, but they do want that debris because there could be some telltale signs what exactly caused this horrible explosion. Miles?
Well, Wolf, as you well know, it's not an overstatement to say that this thing could be unlocked. The puzzle could be solved by simply one piece. So we encourage people, if they see pieces, to let NASA know. Who knows what the significance of that piece might be. We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to go to Washington, check in with Judy Woodruff, and talk about the president and the political implications of all this as NASA embarks on efforts to fly one day again. And we'll also check in with Lou Dobbs, who is at the Kennedy Space Center, where Columbia left 16 days ago in a blaze of glory. Stay with us.
best-selling new male artist of the year is Josh Groban. His debut album has already sold over 3 million copies, featuring the stunning singles You're Still You and To Where You Are. Josh Groban, his debut album, available now at Best Buy.
What have you been up to, Mr. Moneybags?
It's okay. I put it on the credit card.
Those interest charges are gonna get us.
Don't worry, it's our new Capital One No Hassle card.
Check your mailbox today for Capital One's No Hassle Card offer. Great low rates and none of the hassle.
What's in your wallet? Mr. Stevens?
Yeah.
Got you down for over 130 channels, $39.99 a month.
Right, so...
every channel's digital quality. There's access to 31 premium movie channels, 60 pay-per-view movie titles a month.
Great, so that can go on the back of the roof?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, good. So go ahead and pull around back.
You work for the cable company, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why settle for cable? Switch to DirecTV and get over 130 channels, only $39.99 a month. Call 1-800-DirecTV or visit a participating retailer now.
We all knew it would happen. We just didn't know how. That's the words of one NASA worker from Houston today as they consider what happened as the Space Shuttle Columbia came in on what seemed like the flawless conclusion to a nearly flawless mission. Let's continue our coverage as we turn our attention now to Washington and to Florida on a story that really spans the entire country. Lou Dobbs at the Kennedy Space Center, but first Judy Woodruff in Washington. Judy?
That's right. Thank you, Miles. And it has been a full day and a very difficult day for President George W. Bush, who, as we know, until just lately, his main focus has been pressing the U.S. case against Iraq. Well, today the president has talked by telephone with the families of the lost astronauts. He has spoken words of consolation to the rest of the country, to all of us. CNN's White House correspondent Suzanne Malveaux has been at the White House all this day following developments. Suzanne.
Well, Judy, tonight leaders around the world are offering their condolences to the White House as President Bush marks this tragic day with reflection, mourning, and prayer. In honor of those lost, the flag at the White House lowered and house down. President Bush once again charged with carrying out the somber
testing,
duty
1 2 3 4
of bringing
5.
the nation together in time of tragedy.
My fellow
Testing.
Americans,
You want it up higher?
this day has brought terrible news and great sadness to our country.
Testing 1 2 3 4 5.
At 9 o'clock this morning, Mission Control in Houston lost contact with our Space Shuttle Columbia. A short time later, debris was seen falling from the skies above Texas. The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors.
6 Americans and 1 Israeli lost, people the president said assumed great risk in the service to all humanity.
The cause in which they died will continue. Mankind is led into the darkness beyond our world by the inspiration of discovery and the longing to understand. Our journey into space will go on.
Just after 9 o'clock this morning at Camp David, President Bush is notified by his chief of staff that NASA has lost contact with the shuttle. At 10:30, he's briefed by NASA's director and decides to return to the White House early. The Situation Room at the White House goes into full gear, notifying all the principals. By 12:30, the president is back in the Oval Office when NASA's director tells him there are no survivors. 15 minutes later, Mr. Bush, standing at his desk, holds a conference call with the victims' families who are gathered around a speakerphone at the Kennedy Space Center. He tells them, "We express our love and appreciation for all those who died today. I want the loved ones to know there are millions of Americans praying for you, including me and Laura. It's an incredibly tough day for you. May God bless you all. I wish I was there to hug, cry, and comfort you right now." In a poignant moment, a White House aide who was with the president says after the call, a somber Mr. Bush briefly excused himself to the executive residence. The president also called Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon to offer his condolences for the Israeli astronaut lost. And the president received calls from world leaders from Mexico, Canada, and even those recently at odds with the president over his stand with Iraq, France, and Russia.
And Judy, today was a big day for the Department of Homeland Security. Its new Secretary Governor Tom Ridge able to quickly assess and gather information, assign FEMA the lead role in recovery, and also to reassure the American people that as tragic as this disaster was, it was not the result of terrorism. Judy.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. At the same time, they are saying they are pressing ahead with the case against Iraq. That will continue. Well, as you've been hearing from my colleague Miles O'Brien, NASA's engineers are already hard at work trying to solve the mystery of what happened to the shuttle Columbia. But a number of other federal agencies are also involved in the investigation. And for that part of the story, we're going to bring in our Patty Davis. Patty.
Well, Judy, FEMA is heading the response and recovery effort. Other agencies are heading south to take part in the investigation. The debris strewn across several states is crucial to finding what caused the accident.
We are going to gather every piece we can find, treat this much like an aircraft incident, and see if we can solve the puzzle.
Finding the pieces is a massive undertaking, but an essential one. If the cause is structural, debris could provide the key clues.
They can then piece that together to figure out how it came apart, and then that'll help them figure out where the cause was.
That's why officials are appealing to the public to turn over any pictures people took of the shuttle falling and to turn in any pieces found.
If you find debris, please call local authorities immediately to tell them of the location.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency is coordinating the federal government's response and recovery. The military guarding and searching for debris using planes, boats, and helicopters. The FAA instituting a 40-mile wide, 160-mile long restricted zone below 3,000 feet from Texas to Louisiana to protect aircraft involved in the recovery. The National Transportation Safety Board sending vehicle structure and system experts to help. NTSB crash investigators helped piece together debris from the in-flight breakup of the TWA 800 crash. This debris field as much as 100 times bigger.
This is going to be an extraordinarily challenging investigation. The vehicle was at 200,000 feet. It was traveling at 12,500 miles per hour. There simply has never been a breakup like this in aviation or space history.
In addition to debris, NASA says the shuttle had data and voice recorders, but more importantly, it was constantly streaming information to mission control.
We are preserving hardware around the country in our different facilities. We are impounding data here that represented the last data that we received from the crew, and we will be poring over that data 24 hours a day.
Besides NASA's own investigation, an independent group, including the military, the FAA, will also look into what happened, an investigation that could take months, if not years. Judy?
All right, Patty Davis, thanks very much. When you think about it, Miles, it seems almost a miracle that any pieces survived from that altitude and at that speed.
Judy, what I've seen is there aren't many very big pieces, that is for sure. Just 12 hours ago, hundreds of people were gathering at the Kennedy Space Center to see the shuttle landing. Their excitement quickly turned to shock. CNN's Lou Dobbs is at Kennedy. Lou?
Miles, as you say, shock, and the shock is still being felt profoundly here by everyone who works at NASA and who works with NASA. The NASA administrator, Sean O'Keefe, has spent much of the day comforting the families of the 7 astronauts who lost their lives today aboard Columbia. He has also spent much of his time learning as much as possible about what the NASA engineers, managers, and investigators know to this point. And he has been briefing congressional leaders, amongst them House Majority Leader Tom DeLay and Congressman Dave Weldon. And I want to turn now, if I may, to John Zarella, my colleague here, who's covered the space program for some time. This represents something of a departure, does it not? Sean O'Keefe has really opened up the process and is sharing information, which has not always been the first reflex of this agency.
Right, exactly, and certainly back in 1986,
that really was not the case back in 1986. It was far more of a closed family here, and they kept the information very close to the vest for quite some time, but an open process here, certainly.
John, I've just been told that our colleague Gary Tuckman is available. Gary, let's go to you quickly.
Works for NASA. That's why what's happened today. We come to you from the Sunrise Diner in Cocoa Beach, just south of the Cape, where people are obviously talking about what happened today. Right here we have Mike and Joanna. Mike, you were telling me that Joanna, who's your friend, called you to tell you about the shuttle explosion. What did you think when you first heard that?
At first I didn't believe it, shock and amazement. And then when I seen it was true, you think about the families and all that. And very sad thing.
You tell me when you live here, you just take for granted that the missions will all go okay.
Yeah, when I first moved down here, it was all we had to watch everyone come in, and then you just take for granted that they'll get here safely, and this time they didn't.
Thanks for talking with us. We want to go over here. This is Frank and Marilyn. Frank and Marilyn live in New York State half the year, and they live here half the year. And Marilyn was telling me that regularly they go out on their balcony on the ocean here when the shuttle takes off and when it lands, right?
That's right. It's very exciting, and being away from this area, I don't take it for granted. I think it's so exciting to watch the shuttles and the rockets go up, and we're on our balcony every single time.
Including this morning, right?
Including this morning.
Tell me what happened this morning.
We were there at 9 o'clock, and I was looking out, looking at the people on the beach, and waiting for the sound of that beautiful... I'm just really sad about this whole thing. But my heart goes out to all of the people involved, the families especially, their children, and Israel. I feel very sadly because they have a hero, in India, and especially the United States. I'm so sad for all of them. I think they're all heroes.
Frank and Marilyn, thank you very much for talking with me. It's obviously very emotional for the nation, for the world, but particularly for the people here in the Space Coast of Florida. Lou, back to you.
Gary, thank you very much. Gary Tuckman in Cocoa Beach, Florida. Now back to you, Miles.
All right, thank you very much, Lou. A check of the latest developments in today's shuttle tragedy is just ahead. And the question burning on so many minds tonight, what went wrong up there? We'll have a closer look at what we know at this time, obviously very early, and where authorities are focusing their attention as they work through the night tonight, Mission Control Houston. Plus, one of the crew members, Israel's first astronaut. We'll have a live report from Jerusalem for a man who was a national hero in that country. And later, in their own words, family members who are expecting their loved ones to return home to Earth this morning, their thoughts and their feelings on this terribly tragic day.
Ever wonder why people who work at Quest will go to such great lengths to help a customer?
For my father and my uncle.
For 3 generations of McLeods.
For my grandfather, who believed in the spirit of service back in 1919.
In many cases, they watched a granddad or mother working hard as they lived the spirit of service and said, "Count me in."
For the technicians that go out despite the conditions and climb our towers.
Our spirit of service goes back 4 proud generations.
You're born into it.
For my grandparents, I wish they were here to see their company make history again. They'd be proud of us.
And every day, they come to work and grab that bar those great generations before them set so high and raise it even higher.
Doing whatever it takes.
Spirit of service, you never lose it.
Quest folks love their work, and they fully intend to make our heritage a part of your future.
9.3 Sport sedan just received a 5-star rating for collision safety performance from the European New Car Assessment Program.
Welcome back. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board, NASA, the military, and other federal agencies are trying to determine why the Space Shuttle Columbia broke apart this morning in the sky over Texas. All 7 astronauts aboard were lost. Columbia was at an altitude of some 39 miles, traveling 12,500 miles an hour when it broke into fiery pieces. It was absolutely the hottest point of re-entry, 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Parts of the shuttle have been found in East Texas and Louisiana. Some pieces were so hot that they caused fires, as you see here. The spacecraft was so high the debris field may extend into New Mexico and Arizona. Parts of what authorities suspect are human remains also have been found. Now, as for the cause, several minutes before the breakup, there were some sensors on Columbia's left wing. They began failing, temperature sensors specifically, toward the rear portion of the wing. Others registered high temperatures, and there are reports that there were some unusual movements of the flaps at the back called elevons. Memories have gone back to launch day, when cameras saw a piece of foam insulation from the fuel tank breaking off, hitting Columbia's left wing. The shuttle program manager, Ron Dittemore, says at this point, not a smoking gun, but he adds, we cannot discount that there may be a connection. And we should tell you the person who will be heading this investigation. NASA has named a retired admiral who also headed the investigation into the explosion on board the USS Cole in Yemen to lead the investigation. His name is Admiral Harold Hal Gemin, and he will lead this independent investigation into determining the cause of the disintegration of the Space Shuttle Columbia. We will keep you posted on that. A team of experts from the National Transportation Safety Board is heading for Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. That's where NASA has set up a command post. The NTSB will help the space agency in what is expected to be a lengthy and difficult investigation of this morning's disaster.
First things first, NASA starts eliminating possible causes.
We have no indication that the mishap was caused by anything or anyone on the ground.
From there, the potential causes are innumerable, given the 1 million parts and complex operations that go into any shuttle mission. As rocket scientists like to say, it's always what you do not expect, because if you'd thought of it, you'd have fixed it. One of the Space Shuttle program's greatest achievements was the development of the insulating tiles that protect the shuttle on re-entry. There are more than 20,000 of them on each shuttle. Made of silica fiber, they are cool to the touch just seconds after being exposed to a 2,200-degree kiln. While they have been a great achievement, they have been a continuing problem for shuttle managers. They are brittle and can easily be knocked off during launch. The shuttle can land if some insulating tiles are damaged or break off, as seen here on the Space Shuttle Discovery. But if too many tiles are gone, the shuttle would get too hot.
The heat could actually cause the structure of the orbiter to break.
During Columbia's launch, a piece of insulation from the external fuel tank broke off and perhaps damaged some ceramic tiles. But shuttle managers determined it was safe for the mission to continue.
We can't discount that there might be a connection, but we have to caution you and ourselves that we can't rush to judgment on it.
Another likely point of focus for investigators, the attitude of the shuttle on re-entry. If the nose goes too high or too low, the shuttle could tumble and break up.
The belly of the shuttle is well protected, but if you get in the wrong orientation at any moment during that re-entry, you are not protected on all sides. And so, once you start coming apart, there's nothing you can do.
Columbia was the oldest shuttle. Just last year, engineers found stress and age cracks in shuttle engine parts. While those problems, experts say, are not likely to be the cause of this disaster, there could be some other unforeseen age-related problem with the shuttle. Whatever the cause, there may be clues in the data transmitted from the shuttle before communication was lost.
We will be poring over that data 24 hours a day for the foreseeable future.
NASA has undertaken major investigations several times before, the last after the Challenger disaster. Randy Avera worked on that investigation into why the Challenger disintegrated over the ocean shortly after liftoff.
What we do not have, as far as we know today, on the Columbia crash today, is close-up telescopic photos and videos of the actual effects that were taking place on the orbiter.
The first job, finding all the pieces that can be found, looking for clues in the fields, forests, and backyards of eastern Texas and western Louisiana.
Not many people have experience investigating this kind of catastrophe, to say the least. Two of our guests this evening do, however. They both investigated the Challenger accident 17 years ago. With me here in Atlanta, Randy Avera, a former NASA engineer, and joining us from Boston, Eugene Covert, an engineer and educator who served on the Presidential Commission on the Challenger accident. Randy, I'd like to begin with you. Let's talk first of all about this debris. Comparing this huge swath of land where debris has been rained down, compare that to the challenge of trying to lift debris off the ocean floor. Which is a greater challenge for the team?
Well, both had their own unique challenges, but the large area of landmass today is certainly a different challenge from that of 1986, when the many elements of the Coast Guard, Navy SEALs, and U.S. Navy were diving down in about 100 feet or so of the Atlantic Ocean water to retrieve the evidence from the floor of the ocean, as well as collecting it off the surface of the ocean headed northbound in the Gulf Stream currents. There are many more people that are able at this point today to find components that are lying on the ground. So it will be something we look back at comparing the two to see which collected the evidence most efficiently.
All right, Eugene Covert, would you concur with that? I mean, one of the concerns, of course, is that people will take souvenirs, and that souvenir might very well be the smoking gun.
Well, by and large, I would agree. However, I believe that with the activity on the surface of the bottom of the ocean, it's possible that the dredges and so forth would cover up bits and pieces that might turn out to be important. I think that the possibility of finding something useful is possibly higher because it's over land, because there's so many people involved. Of course, one of the problems may be that somebody's trying to sneak a souvenir away. I understand that's a federal offense, and probably you don't want to mess with the feds to do it.
Not only that, very hazardous. Randy, I want to call your attention to something I just found out. I was working the phones here when I had a little break, and if you look at these two flaps, these are movable surfaces on the trailing edge of the wing. They're called elevons. It controls the pitch, the up-down motion of the nose relative to its forward motion. I'm told that prior to those problems with the heat sensors, left wing, this area here, there was some unusual elevon movements that they're looking at right now as we speak, poring over the data. What would that tell you?
Well, it could tell us one of a couple of things. It could be that elevon movement was due to commands that were being sent to the elevons from the onboard general purpose computers. If the inertial measurement system of the orbiter, which monitors the attitude of the orbiter and roll, pitch, and yaw rates, if it was issuing a command or a series of commands to drive those elevons into dynamic positions, that would just be a response from a command. On the other hand, if the hydraulic actuators which drive the elevons, there are 4 elevons, 2 on each wing, and each elevon has a large hydraulic actuator. If those actuators had any malfunctions or failures within the hydraulic actuator, that could also be an issue. But NASA will be separating these into various categories, looking at the data, looking at the flight data, and reviewing the design, and also service history, repairs, or anything that may have been done to those elevon actuators, or the actual rigging of the what are called flipper doors. These are metal and composite material panels that are above what we call the wing cove area.
All right, I want to get one more point in from Eugene Covert. I'm sorry, Randy, to cut you off, but we are running short on time. Mr. Covert, is there anything that you've seen in all of these briefings that catches your attention more than something else?
Well, I have to be frank about this. One of the worst things you can do is speculate at a time like this. It seems to me that there are enough opportunities to make a mistake and put your feet in your mouth. Nature provides you the opportunity now not to speculate and not to wait, but to wait rather until some
all right, but let me ask you this. Short of speculating, do you feel fairly confident NASA will come up with the root cause of this?
I certainly, based on my previous experience, I think that the odds are very high that they will come up with the root cause. I think it's important to point out that the reason you have a serious accident investigation of this kind is to find out what went wrong, take those steps to reduce the likelihood of having such an accident again. I think that requires patience on the part of everybody. I can understand why people are impatient, but nevertheless, I think that patience is required to give the investigators the chance to look at stuff coldly and look at the facts dispassionately and follow the clues to wherever they lead you.
Eugene Covert, Randy Avera, thank you very much for navigating what are very complex waters for the layperson. We appreciate it. One of the reasons we explore space is to push the boundaries of science, and for the Shuttle Columbia 16 days in space, it had been entirely devoted to scientific experiments. Not an exaggeration to say that years of preparation go into the experiments that are selected to fly on space shuttles. The Columbia carried experiments on changes in flame, how flames spread in space, and how flowers change their scent in the absence of gravity. They also studied the effects of weightlessness on rats to learn more about how weightlessness affects humans long term. They measured atmospheric dust to see what dust has to do with global warming. That was the principal experiment of Ilan Ramon, the Israeli astronaut. There were bee, ant, and spider behavior tests in weightlessness, crystal growth, with the hope of finding potential drugs which could cure things like cancer even. Tumor development in space was studied, colon cancer specifically. And there was a study on the evolution of life in the universe that had as its two principal investigators an Israeli and a Palestinian. Now, along with the crew and Shuttle Columbia itself, the knowledge gained on all these experiments vanished today in the skies over Texas. Send it now to, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
The only crime is not having ice cream on your pie. Elevator music isn't the usual. Carpets never stay. And the local bank has hundreds of branches. Of course, we don't live anywhere near perfect, so there's Walgreens, open every day, many 24 hours, with everything needed for the real world. That's life. This is Walgreens.
Somewhere besides the family room. Maybe, Albuquerque? Mom said to me to fire rekindled, whatever that means.
Travelocity's biggest cruise sale ever is going on now.
I know what that means. It means get off your big bottom and take us on a trip. Travelocity. Call or see site for details.
Introducing new America Online 8.0. With hundreds of new features, there's never been a better time to try it.
You've got mail.
With 8.0, I can customize my email.
AOL's new parental controls I can set up for each one of my children.
Now AOL searches are faster than ever with Google. The customer service is free and it's 24 hours a day.
Call now and get 1,025 free hours for 45 days. There's no commitment and you don't even need a credit card.
America Online has so much more.
New AOL 8.0 with hundreds of new features. There's never been a better time to try it.
Flags flying at half-staff over the executive office building right next door to the White House. Earlier today, President Bush remembered Columbia's last crew of 7 for their courage, he said, their daring, and their idealism. For 4 of them, this was their first trip into space. 2 were colonels, both with the Air Force, one American, the other Israeli. Ilan Ramon was his country's first astronaut. He joined NASA as a payload specialist in 1997. Married with 4 children, Ramon was 48 years old. The commander of this mission was Rick Husband. He had been an astronaut since 1994 and piloted the shuttle Discovery just about 4 years ago. Husband leaves behind a wife and 2 children. Laurel Clark was one of 2 doctors on this, her first flight, a mission specialist. She was the mother of 1. William McCool was Columbia's pilot. Age 41 and married, he too was flying his first mission in space. David Brown was the other surgeon on board the shuttle, a former college gymnast, a mission specialist for the flight. He was 46 years old. The payload commander was Michael Anderson. He flew aboard the shuttle Endeavour in 1998. That took him to the Mir space station. Anderson was married and 46 years old. Kalpana Chawla was a native of India. She became an astronaut in 1994. She operated the shuttle's robotic arm on a mission 3 years later. As we remember these astronauts, some of their relatives have chosen to share their grief and their apprehensions with the public. The parents of astronaut David Brown told CNN that they hope the nation's space exploration will go forward. But they said they're also afraid that today's loss was so catastrophic, nothing would be found of the shuttle or of their son.
There's nothing left to study. We saw the debris come down in the newsreel, photographs, and I'd like to have something of Dave to bury. It may not happen.
So hard. The sister of astronaut Michael Anderson was still in shock when she talked with reporters.
It hasn't set in yet. And it probably won't till I hear something very definite. Right now, I'm not listening to the TV because what they said was nothing that I guess I want to believe, because there's nothing that I feel is truly definite yet. So I'm not even listening.
I see. What are your plans? Are you planning to go to Dallas anytime soon?
To Houston, I'll go to Houston when I think it's appropriate. I'll go to Houston to be with my sister-in-law, and if necessary, I will be going to Spokane, Washington.
Her brother, astronaut Michael Anderson, grew up in the Spokane area. He flew to Russia's Mir space station in 1998. He was in charge of the Columbia's science experiments. Well, as we've noted, there is an international dimension to today's tragedy. Ilan Ramon, the first Israeli astronaut to fly in space, was on board the shuttle Columbia. His presence was a source of enormous pride for Israelis and now is the cause of tremendous grief. CNN's Kelly Wallace joins us from Jerusalem. Kelly.
Judy, the first Israeli to travel in space, gave this country something to cheer about and celebrate after months and months of violence. But now Israelis are engaged in what has become an all too familiar ritual here, mourning. This time the loss of a national hero. Colonel Ramon had a distinguished military career. He fought for Israel in 2 wars. He also took part in the successful bombing of a nuclear reactor being built in Iraq in 1981. His extended family, his father and his brother, are now making their way to the United States to be reunited with Colonel Ramon's wife and his 4 children. Before leaving, Ramon's brother spoke out about the emails he had been receiving. He said Ramon looked at this shuttle mission as his proudest accomplishment.
There was euphoria and great joy, because it was the realization of Ilan's greatest dream. He was overjoyed. he corresponded from the shuttle. He wrote that he felt he was above the clouds in every sense.
And condolences coming in from throughout the world, including the Palestinian community. Yasser Arafat expressing his condolences to the American people and also to the Israeli people for their loss tonight. Judy.
Thanks, Kelly. A tragedy that brings us all together. Well, one of the Columbia astronauts who died this morning was Dr. Laurel Blair Salton Clark. She was a mission specialist. Clark was a U.S. Navy commander and a medical doctor. She considers Racine, Wisconsin, her hometown. And our Cece Rogers is there. Cece.
Hi, Judy. We're in front of Laurel Clark's high school, where people have been gathering all evening to pay respects to a fallen hero. On the last day of Shuttle Columbia's 2-week mission, it was Laurel Clark who took Houston's wake-up call.
Well, good morning, Houston. We're getting ready for a big day up here. Had a great time on orbit and really excited to come back home.
That the 41-year-old wife and mother would not make it home is still sinking in her hometown of Racine, Wisconsin. A makeshift memorial sits outside Horlick High School, where Laurel Salton, as she was known then, is something of a hero.
But you did what you wanted to accomplish. We all followed the flight and what she was doing up there, and to have something like that end in this kind of a tragedy, it's just almost beyond words to describe.
Students heard the news at a wrestling match and paused for a moment of silence and to sing the national anthem.
She was a great role model to us because it's pretty cool how someone from our school could go up in space. It's just awesome.
In nearby Milwaukee, Clark's brother said family members take comfort in the fact that she at least fulfilled a lifelong dream to travel in space.
She was a person who was very goal-oriented, and that's where she got where she was, but she was so warm and friendly with people. She loved kids. We all are very concerned about her son Ian and how he'll pull through this.
Family members also take comfort in her many accomplishments. She had degrees in zoology and medicine from the University of Wisconsin at Madison and worked as a Navy submarine doctor, at one point stationed in Scotland, before going to the space program.
Hearing that song reminds me of all the different places down on Earth and all the friends and family that I have all over the world. Thanks, and it's been great working with you and all the other folks.
Her home in Wisconsin was never far from Laurel Clark's thoughts. She took a pennant from her high school up with her in the shuttle, and she was planning to take pictures of a lighthouse not far from here on Lake Michigan that she was supposed to have been able to see from her bedroom at home. Judy?
Cece Rogers taking us to the hometown of one of the 7 lost today. Miles, it just breaks your heart.
It does indeed, Judy. So once again, the United States is in mourning, this time for 7 space explorers who died early today over Texas. CNN's Bruce Morton has more.
Americans mourned in churches.
All this week, our prayers will be for the families that survived those 7 astronauts and the whole space program family.
At the Kennedy Space Center, at the White House, flags at half-staff. At NASA headquarters here, a flag and a banner, which now looks sad. Family members grieve, of course.
That's what he's dreamed of doing most of his life. That's what he said his goals to do.
The principal of astronaut David Brown's old high school
called us last year and asked if there was something that he could take from the high school up with him on this space mission. We eventually did send him a banner of the school that he brought up.
Strangers were shocked in a gym in Chicago's planetarium.
I went to space camp, and now it kind of scares me almost. So I don't know, I'm having kind of second thoughts, but I don't want to get into that.
Well, I'm feeling pretty bad about this accident. I mean, ever since Challenger crashed, I thought there was never going to be another space shuttle accident.
It's just
pure shock, disbelief. This is unreal. I mean, you come out here expecting to see a shuttle land, and it's just not there.
In fact, it's just 17 years and 3 days since the Shuttle Challenger exploded on takeoff. On the anniversary, Columbia commander Rick Husband remembered that crew and 3 others who died in the 1967 fire.
Their dedication and devotion to the exploration of space was an inspiration to each of us and still motivates people around the world to achieve great things in service to others.
President Bush led the mourning for the 7 who died aboard Columbia.
The crew of the Shuttle Columbia did not return safely to Earth, yet we can pray that all are safely home.
And at the NASA briefings for reporters, some voices broke.
My promise to the crew and to the crew families is that the investigation that we have just launched will find the cause, we'll fix it, and then we'll move on.
They will move on. Humankind has crossed oceans, explored continents, walked on the moon. Some kid tonight will be looking at the stars and thinking, why not? The urge to know what's out there is part of who we are. Bruce Morton, CNN, Washington.
The exploration, we hope, will continue. Let's turn it to Wolf Blitzer in Houston. Wolf?
You know, Miles, even as this investigation gets going and questions about the future of the space missions are asked, all sorts of commissions of inquiry, perhaps, that we're not even envisaging, people here in Houston at the Johnson Space Center, they're coming to the gates of this center, they're dropping off flowers, they're remembering, they're expressing their anguish, their sadness. If you take a look at the picture of these 7 astronauts, you look at them, you see the 5 men, the 2 women. Of those 5 men, 1 African American, 1 Israeli, the Indian American woman. It's a beautiful mosaic, cut short so sadly. Miles?
Wolf Blitzer in Houston. On behalf of Wolf in Houston at the Johnson Space Center and Judy Woodruff in Washington, as well as Lou Dobbs down at the Kennedy Space Center, thank you very much for being with us for this special report. Be sure to join me again for another special report an hour from now, Columbia Shuttle tragedy. That's 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific. I'm Miles O'Brien. Larry King Live is up next right here on CNN.